A study in contrast today for the men leaving and going into the country's top law enforcement agency. On the one hand, a send-off for a top FBI agent who tangled with the Trump administration as Trump allies now take the helm, led by people who talk a whole lot more about retribution than the kinds of things that the FBI is known for. Things like preventing terror attacks, cybersecurity, gang violence. The head of the New York field office, James Dennehy, left his office for the last time on Thursday. We showed you some of this late yesterday, to the sound of bagpipes and cheers. He says he was forced to retire after he pushed back against the Trump administration's demand that the FBI hand over the names of agents who worked on January 6 cases. Here's what he had to say to his former colleagues.
There's a motto in the Marine Corps called Semper Fidelis. And Semper Fidelis means always faithful. I will always be faithful to this country, to this organization, and most of all, I will always be faithful to you. And I appreciate you being faithful to me, to this office, and more importantly, our mission. So thank you, and I will be your best cheerleader on the outside. I appreciate it.
So that man, loyal to the country and the Bureau, had to leave abruptly. And that abrupt departure moves the Trump DOJ closer to what they talk about doing, closer to what the far right and Trump's allies have promised to do, a commitment said out loud to make dramatic, revolutionary changes there, and to do what everyone who fears about the future of the rule of law in our country sees as a threat to the institution that serves essential functions to protect our national security and our justice system. There's brand new reporting in the New York Times today about one of the men now in charge, the incoming deputy director of the FBI. He's a former Secret Service agent, a podcaster, and a right-wing media personality named Dan Bongino. That reporting reveals his intense interest with conspiracy theories about the FBI, however baseless, as long as they serve the narratives pushed by Donald Trump about a justice system seemingly weaponized against him. New York Times reports this, quote, Bongino's precise plans for the agency remain opaque. But on recent podcasts, he has said he would rid the agency of politicization and focus on crimes like drug dealing, despite the Bureau's broad mandate to protect national security, investigate crimes, and root out corruption by public officials at all levels. Bongino has frequently focused on FBI officials who, in his mind, showed disloyalty to Trump by pursuing investigations against him or his supporters. Here's what he said after Trump was indicted in the classified documents case.
We fire everyone who stood by. We don't just fire the people who did this. Everyone who stood by and did nothing. While the Department of Justice and the FBI have been ravaged by corruptocrats, everyone gets fired. Everyone. If you stood by and did nothing. That's how.
Fire everyone. Never mind that the agents, all of the agents involved, were simply doing their jobs as their jobs were defined by their leaders. No wrongdoing has ever been found in that investigation. And the charges were only dismissed because Donald Trump won the November election. Not to mention that mass firings would hamper the critical functions of the FBI, the things it does every day. If anything, Bongino's comments about the agency he is now in charge of, he now leads, reveals a contempt for the country's top law enforcement agency.
Ladies and gentlemen, the FBI is an absolute disaster. It is an abomination to the country. The corruption needs to be immediately defunded. The FBI should no longer exist as it's constituted now. The mission should be divvied up. The money should be divvied up amongst other agencies that take their oath to the country seriously.
He said those things again about an FBI being led at the time by a person handpicked by Donald Trump, Christopher Wray. But today, the FBI is in the hands of Mr. Bongino and other Trump allies who are laser focused on retribution on behalf of Donald Trump. It's where we start today. New York Times Justice Department reporter Glenn Thrush is here. Also joining us, former Assistant Director for Counterintelligence at the FBI, MSNBC Senior National Security Analyst Frank Figliuzzi is here. With me at the table, MSNBC Legal Analyst, former SDNY Criminal Division Deputy Chief Christy Greenberg is here. Glenn Thrush, let me start with James Dennehy. An extraordinary message sent by him to the men and women of the FBI on his way out. The description of sort of a day in the life where in the morning you wear a suit for an interview, in the afternoon you get changed for a SWAT arrest, and you know in the evening there's another interview, and then wash, rinse, repeat. This was someone who loved his job. This was someone who loved the men and women he did his job with. This is someone who loved the country. This is someone who was a veteran. This is someone whose politics are, to me, indiscernible, but clearly do not resemble anything partisan. And this is someone who was purged from the FBI. What does that mean?
Well, the thing that's really interesting about this is he is probably the kind of guy, if there had not been the Mar-a-Lago search, which, as you rightly pointed out, was not in the decision matrix at the FBI. It was a court-mandated search, and it is the responsibility of federal law enforcement and the FBI to execute that. If they had chosen not to, they would have been in violation of the law. But he's precisely the kind of guy you could easily see ascending to one of the top positions in the Bureau if none of this had ever happened. What's really interesting about the whole Bongino dynamic and the Trump dynamic is that prior to the Comey experience in 2016 and 2017, you know, Trump had been on record speaking very positively about federal law enforcement, about the FBI. Over the course of the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, that tune has changed. And you know, when I see those scenes of him getting into the SUV around Foley Square, it betrays kind of my history as a New Yorker and as a reporter in New York. He was motivated to join the Marines after 9/11. One of my most vivid memories as a reporter covering the attack on the World Trade Center was being in that exact spot where he was standing, which was then covered by ash and debris, and watching the FBI agents from the New York field office fan out over Lower Manhattan to begin their investigation. So it's a very resonant moment, particularly when you see the bagpipes, not only for people who are interested in the future fate of the Bureau, but also to those of us who had an experience around 9/11 with the New York field office and saw firsthand what those agents there were able to accomplish.
What is your reporting, Glenn, on his intent in that, you know, top 10 list that he put out, the 10 best things about being an FBI agent?
I think, you know, it was a big surprise to us. And if I'm remembering correctly, it was a Saturday. It was either a Friday night or a Saturday when we obtained, my fellow reporters and I obtained this internal email that he sent to his staff at the field office, essentially referring to the famous dig in email in which he expressed his determination to resist, along with the interim leadership of the FBI, what Emile Beauvais, the acting Deputy Attorney General, was attempting to push, which was to provide the list, the names of thousands of agents with the intention of isolating those who had participated, not only in the Trump investigations, but the January 6th investigations, which came as a big surprise to all of us. I think what he is attempting to do is to set out a template and a predicate, and 10 is a very biblical number. I'm reminded of sort of the movie The Ten Commandments. To sort of hold, I think what he's attempting to do essentially is to hold the incoming leadership, including Dan Bongino, accountable to these standards, so that there's something external against which to measure what they're intending to do.
Here's what he wrote. We will not bend, we will not falter, we will not sacrifice what is right for anything or anyone. You guys reported this. In the email, he used pointed language that echoed this earlier message. I've been told many times in my life, when you find yourself in a hole, sometimes it's best to quit digging. Screw that. I will never stop defending this joint. I'll just do it willingly and proudly from outside the wire. The circumstances of his being forced to resign have been the subject of a lot of your reporting, and I have to confess, I still don't completely understand it. What did he do?
In terms of his resignation?
Why did they make him leave?
It is not clear, again, as I think you pointed out, and we've seen this with the forced transfers in the FBI field office. We've seen it at the FBI headquarters. We've seen it at Main Justice, and we've seen it in the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office. And we just reported, two of our reporters just reported that two senior prosecutors at SDNY, the office that defied Main Justice's push to dismiss the Adams charges, have been put on leave and escorted out of the building. So this is going on across all levels. But what he did was resist, and he was in a position where they could compel his retirement. And I think he was fortunate. I think a lot of people who are leaving, particularly the less senior people at the Department of Justice, are leaving into a more uncertain future, both in terms of their pensions and also in terms of what is turning out to be a very glutted market in law firms for them to obtain employment in.